Okay, welcome to this week's episode of Hashtag Leadership, What's on Your Mind. This week I've got the pleasure of interviewing and hearing the story of Steve Burns. Steve, how are you doing?
Good, mate. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad, thanks. I've just been having a little, we just had a conversation behind the scenes as well about, we know each other from Phil Quirk. He was on episode 5 of this podcast, and you're going to be episode 22. So that made me feel a little bit good. And this is going really great, and we've got some great guests on. So everyone knows that we've got 20 minutes. This is about adding value to other people's leadership journeys and getting them to stop and think and change their perspective. So Steve, as I hit start on the 20 minutes, just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so my name is Steve Burns, like you mentioned. As we met through Phil Quirk, me and Phil have set up a new business during lockdown called My Goji. And My Goji is essentially a combination of Phil's background, being the lead performance coach that he is, and my time in the special forces and the career I've had in the military and the things I've learned outside of it. I also founded a veteran community called Up Spartan. We currently have around about 12,000 members on all platforms, and we're going through the process of becoming a CIC, a community interest company. And I come from a Royal Marines background, and then later on I joined the SBS, left 2012, went on a bit of a journey of self-development myself, came through the other side and decided I wanted to use my story and what I'd learned to help other people.
Fab, excellent. So as you can probably imagine, this is why I wanted to get you on, because you've got lots of things and we've only got 20 minutes. So let's just start where I usually ask each guest at different points about, if you were to reflect back, where was your leadership journey start from, whether you were aware of it or not? Where do we go back to?
Well, it's retrospectively, I look back and I can say it started in childhood. I think we're all leaders from childhood in some aspect of our lives, but I didn't really know about it until the last few years. Someone asked me to do a public speaking gig, and they asked me to do it on resilience and leadership. And my reply was, what do I know about leadership and resilience? Whereas actually I've lived my whole life kind of living through that kind of stuff. So yeah, I'd say only in the last few years, really. I mean, in the military, I was a leader. I was, as I went up through, even in recruit training, I was a section commander, but I never saw myself as a leader. I just seen myself as doing a job. And I suppose leading by example, and it wasn't necessarily to be a leader, it was just wanting to be the best that I could.
Excellent. So I'm really passionate about sharing the transferable skills from what we did in the military. Obviously, I was in the learning and development element of the leadership and the military as a whole. What do you see of being outside the military, about what some of the stories that you can pinpoint about the power of the environments that you've been in and some of the leadership things you've had to deal with?
I definitely think it's relatable. There's a lot of stuff that you learn in the military that is transferable. Being in high tempo, hostile environments, working in teams, I think all of that stuff kind of lends itself well to becoming a civilian. But I think sometimes it could be lost. Sometimes people leave and almost, it can be a case where they kind of forget that they leave them skills behind and don't bring them with them. And I find that that can be a common story with some people, is that they've almost forgotten what got them to where they are. And then they stop looking forward, if you like.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah. And again, that's an accountability mindset, opportunity driving forwards, and where does that come from? For yourself, looking at, I always say to people about, we have to lead ourselves first to then, like you mentioned, about have that role modeling into others. And again, thinking back into, and again, reflecting, like you said, about your leadership experiences, are there any things that you can go back to and have been quite pinnacle for you to be like, that's where I learned that skill? And how was that skill sort of like presented to you? Was it in a training environment? Was it in real life?
I think I had a very high tempo career. A lot of my learning was actually done in an operational environment. I was a section corporal for the beginning of the Iraq conflict. And I think a lot of my leadership was learned actually on operations. But I suppose it was something that I did without putting a label on it. I did it because I wanted to, and you're right, you've got to be a leader of yourself first before you can lead anybody else. And for me, I only focused on trying to be the best that I could do and lead by example. And then, I mean, it was quite strange because I joined the Marines at the age of 16. So for me as a section corporal, it's like at the age of 16, going through recruit training and being a section commander or a 2IC and telling lads that were older than me by some years what to do, especially when they're cold and wet, didn't sometimes go down too well. And then that kind of progressed through the Marines. And for me, like I said, it was just about trying to be the best that I could and not really focus on what other people were doing. And as it transpired, looking back, people say how they used to look up to me and I was able to help them to achieve what they wanted to. But I was lucky that I had some really great role models as well. Because I joined at such a young age, the guys that I looked up to were a good, 5, 7, in some cases 12 years older than me. So I had a lot of really kind of senior role models and almost like big brothers to kind of help me through my journey.
Yeah.
But if you're looking for, I can't really pinpoint anything where I could say, oh, this is where I learned that. I'd say that the whole process of going through that hardship and that adversity led to building the resilience and kind of the self-belief to be a good leader.
Do you know, as you were talking that, it reminded me about something that is especially relevant right now in the fact of, you were talking then about things just happen, don't they? You fast-paced career, lots of things going on, and almost being reactive in your leadership style. And in the current global situation we find ourselves in with COVID, where we're coming out the back of COVID now, that it's really interesting in the business world when really successful people, and we encourage people to be proactive and look forward and plan. But actually, the people who are being successful right now in this current situation are the people who are being reactive. Sometimes we look at reactive skills as leaders as a negative, but I suppose you've got to do something over nothing. Is that something you sort of resonate with?
Yeah, I think it's about adapting to your environment, isn't it? Yeah, it's good to be proactive and kind of plan ahead as much as you can. But there's certain times when that's not possible. You can do all the planning you want. There was a saying in the military, and I only mentioned it the other day, chatting to somebody, no plan survives first contact with the enemy. And you can plan and plan and plan. And I think particularly in the special forces world, we were really meticulous with our planning. And that's what led to kind of so much of our mission success, was the planning that went into it. But we also knew that we would go on the ground and, well, exactly that. The enemy's not going to do what you want it to do. and it's about how you adapt to that. So yeah, have a plan as thoroughly as you can, but also be ready to react and change accordingly. And I think the key to it also is not getting bogged down. And if I go back to the battlefield scenario, the enemy would do something that you weren't expecting. You would kind of be focused on that, but then you didn't get drawn into it. You would overcome it or maneuver around it to continue your mission. But if you get too drawn into it and then and you don't have that forward momentum to carry on, you'll end up just getting drawn into the problem, and then you lose all that momentum. Yes.
Yeah, I'd love to know and to share your thoughts on something. I was lucky enough to do some Special Forces observational work just once or twice, and it was amazing. And again, I think it's put out there, and I say this quite a lot, that the Special Forces are renowned for doing the simple things really well. and not overcomplicating it. So you were alluding to that then, but could you tell us a little bit about that mantra about keep it simple?
Yeah, I think that right from the beginning of selection, that's kind of the mantra. I mean, you go through the hills phase, and essentially you're just a number. They don't really care. You're just a Bergen running in the hills. Once you get to the jungle phase, that's when they start paying more attention to you as an individual to see if you've actually got what it takes. Yes, you've proved yourself physically, but now what are you like as a person? And that's all they expect. It's the basics done well. But they are meticulous about the basics. They will pick you up for everything, like things that you might overlook. Simple things like where you take a fire position. Have you thought about which side of the cover you're going to go? So are you exposing the smallest percentage of your body compared to the largest? When you stop for a water stop, are you making sure you've got the right bearing on your compass and doing all the things that you should be doing? They're all basic things, but they're all essential, and you need to be continuously doing the basics well. And that continues throughout Special Forces. Like the other mantra was, it's no black art. It's the basics done well.
Yeah.
And that's true. But doing the basics well continuously is where people slip up. It's having that discipline.
And also, like, talking about putting that into other transferable environments, running your business. I sat down after 12 months of being out, and one of the terms I started talking about all the time is I saw people being busy, and there was just stuff going on. And there's no, and having military background, it's like having focus and direction. And I sometimes laugh at people that when people don't understand military background, they automatically think that that's shouting and that's dictatorship. And we know it's not. But it's that having that focus and direction that you alluded to earlier on as well.
Yeah, definitely. More haste, less waste. And I think for me, I was asked about the difference between leadership in conventional military and special forces. And I think for me, definitely what I noticed, there's almost a culture difference. In the special forces, it's almost led from the ground up. Yeah, there's a command structure, but it's almost like the commanders aren't driving or steering the ship, or maybe steering it, but they're certainly not driving it. It's almost it's that kind of that picture of the dogs on leads kind of getting held back. It's that, and it's because we've all got that kind of that growth mindset. We all want to achieve our mission, achieve our goals, and that's not just on operations. That's in the training environment, and whenever we're back on camp, we've all got that common purpose and that drive, and no one's persuading anyone to do it. Everyone's got their own motivation and kind of, and it's suppose it's big boys rules. We've kind of, you've got through selection for a reason, and it's because you've got that drive. So yeah, I think that's important to highlight about leadership. Awesome. You can create a culture that's led from the ground up, to a winner.
Yeah, I talk all the time about having what environment are you creating as a business owner. And again, the link between obviously my background, our background as military, but also my bigger background is in sport and linking high performance and all those little looking for small gains. And that comes from the British cycling and Dave Brailsford, but high performing teams do those little things, don't they? And again, I go back to self-awareness all the time about that self-awareness of you, but then your team.
Yeah.
Quick divert, really, because I know you've got a family. I talk about the transferable skills from leadership into parenting.
Yeah.
What do you have any thoughts on that? Because it really makes people think differently about leadership, the journey, and the people around us.
Leadership and parenting.
Yeah.
The first thing I'd say is that Special Forces is child's play compared to parenting. So that's the first thing, and I mean that as well. I mean, I've jokingly said, might have to edit this out, but I've jokingly said on an interview for a parenting blogging site, because I've got a parenting app called Wheel, which is about spending quality time with your kids.
Yeah, that's fine.
World in our hands. And I was on this blog, and And I equated being a single parent to almost being waterboarded over weeks and months. I'm not sure if I made it in. Well, I definitely feel it saps your energy. But go back to your question, I think for me, I always try and do my best. But I think the big point about being in leadership as a parent, it's not about being perfect, and it's not about portraying that perfect image. It's about being real, and also having the ability that if you've dropped the ball and you've kind of maybe done something that you wouldn't have done in the heat of the moment, going back and apologize and say, look, and explaining that as well, and saying, look, I'm human. I have a conversation with my son and said, you're 7, I'm 37. I've got 30 years on you, but I'm still learning. And there will be times when I don't do as well as maybe I could do, but that's okay, as long as we learn and move on. And I said, and it's the same for you. Yeah. So I think that's probably the thing I would highlight about parenting and leadership.
Yeah, and exactly what you just explained then is exactly when I love it when I talk about things like that, because I had an incident with a client, and they didn't at the time have children, and I was talking through a perspective of I've got 4 kids, obviously lots of leadership, lots of development going on there, but he actually said, Stuart, it sounds like you talk to your children. And then as soon as he said it, he said, I can't believe I've just said that, because how simple is that? But then what he then put into his business was, maybe I don't talk to the people in my business as much as I should do. Yeah. So when you start getting people to think about parenting, sport, military stories, that changes your perspective. Yeah. So we've only got about 4 minutes left. I've been watching some of your content on Op Spartan and some of the things that you've been looking to put out there in the last couple of weeks. Yeah. I really want you to take this opportunity to share some of that thought process, because I think it's really powerful. We've been having a couple of people on the podcast in the last couple of months talking about failure and resilience and people coming back from quite dark places. And I know that you're in that world and helping and supporting people. So could you share us that sort of mantra, if you like?
Yeah, so with Op Spartan, it was simply set up to try and change the narrative. I think there's a lot of people, a lot of veterans in the wider community where maybe they're feeling a bit lost. And I think the language we use and the kind of the focus at the minute is very much on, an example is PTSD. There's a lot of spreading awareness for PTSD, but my point is we don't need to raise awareness for PTSD. We already know that's there. We need to raise awareness for the other outcomes and the other potentials. For example, post-traumatic growth. I didn't know about that until only a matter of months ago. Yeah. And actually, I thought if I actually probably went through post-traumatic growth, I didn't know it was there. I just did it. Whereas I think if people know that it's there and they can kind of see that there's another avenue, then there might lead to a better outcome. When people leave the military, they can, not in all circumstances, but they can, especially if they've done it since school like me. Once you walk out the gate, you kind of become a bit lost. You lose your purpose, your identity, and then your brightest light's behind you. And I think if you kind of keep on that road where you kind of keep looking back, that just leads to a bit, essentially, doom and gloom. You need to realize that you've got all them skills, bring them with you, and kind of focus on where you're going. Focus on where you're going and make sure that every year you've got something just as compelling as what was behind you to keep you growing. Because that's the key, isn't it? It's like anything in nature. If it's not growing, it's dying. And that goes for yourself. Your mind, your body, you need to keep pushing. You need to keep achieving something. And it might be something as simple as learning a new skill, reading a book, but you're still doing something that's developing you.
Yeah, and I love that. I remember watching one of the first videos you talked about it, and again, these labels that we attach to things, they come just something we hear, and it just becomes noise. And changing the focus, I think, is brilliant, and I think it's going to have a massive impact. So, just last minute, where are you going in your business? Where's your future leadership? Where's your drive and focus now?
So we've got Op Spartan, which is really exciting. We're developing an MVP app website, and we're looking for a hub and maybe we'll have more up and down the country. So that's really good. But one thing, talking about being reactive, I'm involved with Phil Quirk on PQ Performance, which is an NLP and hypnosis training company. And obviously we can't get people into a room these days. So we reacted and we looked at what we could do. And that's when we set up My Agoji. I'm really excited about My Agoji and its potential. It will be in a holistic approach to mindset. And essentially one of the cornerstones is using adversity to create resilience. Agoji is the Spartan, the name of the training Spartan boys went through. We've all had an Agoji. We've all had some adversity. Now let's use that as your shield to push forward. So I think that'll be really exciting in the next 12, 18 months.
Fab. Excellent. I've just turned off the alarm because we came to a natural stop then 5 minutes before, and sometimes I have an issue turning it off. So Steve, thank you so much for your time today. If you're watching it on YouTube, guys, make sure you hit subscribe. You can hit the bell in the corner. I've just recently learned that, and tells you all the notifications of the next episodes. We're coming out on Wednesday mornings every week. If you're on the podcast provider and you're listening to us, make sure you hit us a review and pass it forwards. So that just leaves me to say, Steve, thank you so much for your time today. That was really insightful and really, really good. And hopefully everybody enjoyed that. And we'll see everybody next week. I'm going to put your links below so people can check out all the links to OpSpot and My Agoji and also yourself.
Awesome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Just for your time.
See you next week, guys. Bye.